It all started with old immigration. During the early and mid-19th century, immigrants flocked from northwestern Europe to America. This wave of immigration goes as far back as the Pilgrims and Quakers. Immigrants wanted to escape the oppression and poverty of their mother countries. They saw America as a country with religious freedom, political freedom, and opportunity to build a life, otherwise known as God, gold, and glory. During the 1840s and 50s, huge waves of immigrants flooded into America. This huge wave of immigrants helped inspire the creation of the Know Nothing Party. This group became the second largest political party in the country. They formed using nativism as the center of their political platform. Nativism adverts to the descendants of the 13 colonies. Americans feared immigrants were degrading their culture and taking their jobs due to their volition to work for lower pay. This made Americans hostile towards immigration. A contributing factor to this hostility was religious differences. According to the Anglo-conformity theory of assimilation, most immigrants were non-Protestant and were largely Catholic. The immigrants were afraid of the political influence of Protestants and thus felt compelled to adapt their cultural traditions to more Anglican ways in an effort to conform with the rest of America. Examples of this are the attacks on Catholic churches in Philadelphia in 1844 and the murder of 22 immigrants on Election Day in 1855 in Kentucky. In 1856, the Know Nothing Party campaigned as the American Party. Their platform included changing naturalization to 21 years, excluding immigrants and Catholics from public office, as well as taking away suffrage rights. Their only real effect on history was they changed the voting outcome of the election of 1856 and influenced the early Republican Party. By 1856, they had died out, split over the issue of slavery. Most members joined the Republican Party, which increased the amount of votes for Lincoln. The next wave of immigration was called New Immigration. This immigration movement is from the 1880s to the 1920s. Immigrants poured into Ellis Island and Angel Island from southern Eastern Europe and Asia. The American Restriction League of 1894, another anti-immigrant group, aimed to keep out immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe. They posted their beliefs in newspapers and to degrade immigrants and had political influence in order to achieve their goals. Ellis Island received, on average, 3,000 to 5,000 immigrants per day. These people migrated because they had the rags to riches dream. America was known as the land of opportunity. Immigrants during this era got low-wage jobs and worked for so long hours a day in poor and unsafe conditions. They lived in tenement housing, which they shared with up to as many as 20 other people. An example of immigrants escaping to America for a better life were the Chinese. They came to America, and since they were used to much worse living and job conditions, they worked for less and longer than American workers. Americans became very upset, and Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which prevented any Chinese from coming into America to work for 10 years. It also restricted Asians coming in already in America from having citizenships, so they were all considered aliens. All Chinese were required a certificate to enter the country, even to re-enter if they left. The Chinese Exclusion Act was just the precursor to more strict and permanent immigration laws that came in the early 20th century. Restrictions started with the American Restriction League proposing a bill to require a literacy test in order to enter the U.S. in exchange to the entrance tax from $2 to $5. This proposal led to the National Origins Act in 1924, which was the response to the overwhelming flood of immigrants from Asia, Eastern, and Western Europe. Congress was upset with the amount of foreign people entering America, taking jobs and essentially soiling American culture. The National Origin Act of 1924 was passed. The act itself created quotas on the amount of immigrants that could enter America and completely excluded any person considered Asian from entering the country. This quota allowed for 2% of an ethnic population, according to the 1890 census, could enter the country. There were also literacy tests and required a tax to enter the country. This act was an attempt from Congress to preserve the national identity America had already built. Only people who were considered beneficial to America were allowed in. No undesirables that would soil the American image that we desperately wanted to maintain. The contributions of the new immigrants were transformative to America. The ethnic diversity of the immigrants changed America into a more multicultural society with varied language, traditions, and practices. As different cultures came to converge, the way America was pictured adapted. The processes and results for this change has been studied and compiled into separate theories. One of the earlier theories was the Anglo-conformity theory, which was mentioned previously. Later, historians began to accept the melting pot theory, which described the nation as a fondue pot. Each culture is melted down and conforms with the others, thus sacrificing certain aspects of their heritage. This theory has since been widely replaced with the salad bowl theory, which states that each cultural group is its own individual ingredient or piece of a puzzle that, when looked at as a whole, makes you American culture. The more attractive quality about the salad bowl theory is that immigrants don't lose the qualities that make them unique, better representing present-day culture.